Now, before we move on to the coffee break, sponsored by SES Networks, I'd like to call in for our last keynote speech on stage, the Chief Executive Officer of PCCW Global. Please welcome Mr. Marc Halbfinger.
Just here to see if you get that chance to the video next time I realize that I stand between you and a long-awaited coffee break, so I'll try and be a little bit interesting and a little bit fast while they click on something. There we go. Thank you. I'll just go down to slideshow. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Perfect. Innovation. I'll talk about three things. One is the innovation that we're starting to see in business, and then I'm going to deal with something a little bit boring. What happens in the back end? And I'll try and make that a little bit exciting and meaningful to everyone. And then you'll give me 1 minute at the end, because I do represent PCCW Global, and Sameh, who runs our office here in the Middle East and Africa, said I must provide at least one small commercial. And so I'll do my best to do that. And if not, you can read him in the Telecom Review interview, which is quite interesting. What are the trends that are influencing the global market today? Obviously, the traditional voice and data business are taking a hit, without a doubt. Competition or challenge, as some would call it, from the OTTs and other digital giants around the world are starting to impact us, including device manufacturers, vendors of every type. Everyone is effectively being disrupted due to the cause of various forms of innovation. And softwareization is causing that disruption for many reasons, by the way. Probably the underlying driver to all that, and we heard an excellent discussion this morning from the head of the university, also has to focus on something that wasn't mentioned, which is open source. The open source community worldwide is pushing behavior at a rapid pace. Cloud-based virtualization is gaining increased momentum, and I'll talk about that at the enterprise layer. And traditional carriers are diversifying into various digital things. We heard the gentleman from Accenture focus on that. And AI and analytics is certainly taking us to the next position. The current carrier business model, or the network carrier, which I represent working for PCCW Global and HKT or Hong Kong Telecom, is being pushed to reorganize internally and externally. Some might say we have our backs to the wall, but perhaps that's the best time to innovate. Connectivity remains indispensable. How are you going to get cloud? How are you going to get a phone call if you're not able to connect, if you don't have the bandwidth? But the traditional telecommunications market, at least from bankers' eyes, at this moment appear to be a bit deflationary. And so economic value seems to be shifting. And as a matter of fact, bankers are now coming to service providers and saying, why not separate your assets? Create a ServCo and an InfraCo, an infrastructure company and a service company. But some of that, I think, is just bankers' eyes without actually getting into the focus of what network-based service providers do and how they segregate their user bases between consumers, enterprises, and the wholesale space. And so the new entrants are starting to emerge and taking up those focus areas that bankers want to see. And this drive for demand in different approaches and skill sets in the carrier industry is impacting organizations. How do you take, in our organization, for instance, in HKT, there are over 20,000 people. How do you take people who for years have been trained for physical hardware and say, no, now we want you to be software certified, cloud certified, and we want you to recertify every 8 to 12 months in order to make sure that you're ahead of the game? How do you reshape people's behaviors and attitudes around commercial models, as we just heard before, that you have to disrupt? How do you take an entire organization that's 20,000 strong and move them to agile and not just the DevOps colleagues? Because if you just do the DevOps colleagues and move them to agile, the product people, the marketing people, and the ones who are touching the end user may not fully understand what agile means and how it's supposed to deliver value through the value chain to the end user. So we saw a lot of bullets from different colleagues before, but let me just give you a break on two sides. We have a little bit of the push here happening in the commercial markets, how enterprise business is sold, and a little bit of discussion around Internet of Things, where one might think is more consumer-oriented. And there's a lot of dialogue around it about what will the user get from Internet of Things, but very little dialogue about how it's going to get managed on the back end. What will the relationships look like between a service provider that provides an IoT device or the cloud-based entity that's actually delivering the service that the IoT device manufacturer requires? Picture, if you will, Rolls-Royce engines, who are providing engines to Emirates Airlines or providing engines to Singapore Airlines. As they distribute those engines downstream, what's happening to the IoT capabilities as they move forward? How are those things moving forward in a B2B2C model? This is an internal introductory slide that we have in Hong Kong for HKT, which says where are we headed in IoT for the very basic start of the business, which is just sensor deployment, tracking alert, how we're then going to provide data visualization to end users of various forms, and then ultimately where we believe value sets will come in items 4 and 5. And there are a lot of slides that unpack this, but one of them which I think is important to take a look at is how complicated is it to actually deliver to the consumer segment all of the different components that need to take place, all of the different systems and layers and requirements. How do you reshape an organization to give all of these 6 levels and all of the interfaces that go on between BSS systems, OSS systems? How do you do what many independent ecosystems in the cloud, such as Amazon, who you'll hear from later, or Google have done in the cloud, by providing and exposing their back end to the end user? The beauty of what the clouds have done is simply said to an end user, here's my back end, use it automatically and dynamically. That is the key. And that's what we're trying to do at HKT by delivering these value sets. But the digital transformation that you see at the bottom, to get from the bottom end all the way to the top, really quite a challenge. How do you do real-time, on-demand, all online, allowing the user to do it yourself within the framework of the various social media environments while factoring for all of the generational values that have to take place? And that's just in the consumer side. The state of the enterprise network, where things are moving so dynamically, is becoming very complicated. Enterprises that have seen difficulty in scaling have had load shifts going from their independently managed networks, trying to manage certain applications through the public cloud. That in and of itself is a challenge, because then you lock yourself up to one vendor or another. And we're already hearing about hybrid cloud environments. How will I, as a user, for instance, in Hong Kong, where I'm coming from, be able to draw cloud scalability both from Aliyun, which is the Alibaba cloud, as well as from AWS or from Google Cloud? Can a hybrid strategy work? And what is the platform then that an end user allows itself to manage multiple cloud interfaces? How can we assure something which governments really need to look at from the point of view, and I'll talk about the ITU a little bit later, governments traditionally, for over 150 years, have tried to assure ubiquity, that an end user would be able to have any service, anywhere, anytime. How do we assure that takes place? So, one thing that we did, we said we're not going to be able to do it ourselves, and we have to do something through some form of acquisition. So we acquired a software company that knows how to deliver community, network, and software all together. Console Connect was the entity that we acquired. It's delivering us quite a bit of inter-service automation. It's basically a platform, the basics of a digital platform that facilitates the interaction amongst multiple service providers. Moving to a platform business model, which you just heard the gentleman from Accenture describe, is actually quite critical. But doing it has all sorts of complexities underneath. And usually when a telco acquires a startup, they'll do something natural, which is to integrate the startup. And this time we took a slightly different approach. We bought a 50-strong startup and we said we're going to integrate the telco into the startup. And we've decided to change our entire organizational processes to become agile, to reshape the organization. But let me promise everybody here, it's a journey. It's one that takes a long time. It requires reshaping people's mindsets and thoughts. And I was very much inspired by the presentation this morning from the leader of the Dubai University with regard to how mindsets need to change in order to push things forward. But it's not just tomorrow's generation that has to change. The people that are employed today need to change as well. And that's really the challenge. By the way, I gave a small example here just so that you'll see. One of the things that we just ran, and I think that e-gaming is becoming popular here in the Middle East, this Console Connect platform you can see, we're already able to use it not just for cloud-to-cloud connectivity, not just cloud to network, but also network to network. And when you have e-gaming, and you want to build a platform where gamers who are really going to be the driving force of sports worldwide in the next 20 to 25 years, you need to really make sure that your ICT space is in place. And here we use capacities into cloud from Google, from AWS, and from Azure. And the next time around, we'll be doing so with Alibaba as well. All of this managed quite cleanly over the environment. And we've onboarded many different clouds, and we have a plan to more than triple this volume of onboarded cloud capabilities around the world by the middle of 2020. It's a huge challenge in terms of the people, the mindsets, and where we're going to move forward. But the key really is to make sure that you're having low latencies, hybrid ability, and capability. So I spoke a bit about the complexities of consumer. I spoke a little bit about the complexities of enterprise and how we're trying to tackle it. And now let me take something really boring for you, and that's the back end. But I added the word blockchain, so that should get everybody interested. What happens if we're settling voice business, even between Etisalat and Du here in the UAE, or between Etisalat and PCCW Global between Hong Kong and the UAE? We have a very complicated process. Carrier A creates a deal with Carrier B. We create various exchange rates for destinations. We determine how things are going to happen. It's a very laborious process, which takes a long time to make sure, comparing CDRs and so on. Actually, these disputes and so on historically used to take between 9 to 12 months, and the disputes of 9 to 12 months was worked into the system. The question is, in the world of automation, can we take the back end and move it into minutes or seconds? And so we started to run some trials. Together with, I don't know if Mr. Amiri here is, but together with my colleague, Mr. Ali Amiri, who's part of the Global Leaders Forum of various carriers around the world, we took part, a number of carriers, in something called a POC, proof of concept, to determine can we leverage blockchain at an industry level. PCCW and Colt decided to initiate a trial, but instead of saying, oh, we're going to lead and compete, we said we're going to open our trial to the entire industry. We exposed everything that we were doing to our competitors. Because we said, actually, at the back end, are we competing with each other, or do we need to collaborate in order to facilitate a much smarter industry as we go forward? We also worked with the ITU, with MEF, with the I3 Forum, various standards bodies, in order to make sure things were there. And this is the way things started. We first used old records to demonstrate what we were doing with historical data. And then we said, no, historical data isn't good. In order to prove the concept, we're going to go with live data. And we did all of this within the span of 3 months. And then we said, now that the solution is expanded to allow verification and settlement in real time, using an innovative multi-layer blockchain, it's time to go to multi-carriers. And we included Telefonica, Telstra, Orange, BT, Colt, and ourselves. All of these carriers work together in order to publish information to a multi-blockchain. And while we were doing that, we also went not just from voice, but to a new generation business called bandwidth on demand. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, that not only do you want to get a cloud load in order to deal with 20 gigabits of storage. Sameh was asking me a little question about a year and a half ago, we ran a trial in Hong Kong for the Rugby Sevens, which was 360 degrees virtual reality. First time in the world that it was done. So I asked my team, a little bit foolishly I might add, please store some of that so that we'll be able to show it to people that want to see it. After 17 minutes, I get a call from the NOC, from the Network Operations Center, and they said, sir, in Hong Kong they call me sir, which is unusual. They said, we're at 17 terabits in 17 minutes. Would you like me to stop? I said, yeah, I think we're okay. Storing 17 terabits in 17 minutes seems a little bit much. And that's where things go when you have 360 degree 4K virtual reality. And so bandwidth on demand is going to require all sorts of movement between cloud, data centers, different operators, different service providers. It can't all exist in one single ecosystem. And this is an interesting approach that we took simply for quoting, for ordering, not for provisioning, but for settlement of traffic. Processes that can take as much as 3 months, in this instance, were down to seconds. And so we were able to run a voice trial, a bandwidth on demand trial in the back end, using various formats, different types of environments. It didn't matter what you were providing the data from, whether the proof of concept elements was coming from a Telarix back-end voice switch, or if it was coming from Excel spreadsheets and PDFs. They were able to put everything together into the blockchain and create an on-demand environment. Look at this column for 100 million CDRs processed for 6 carriers multiple times in less than 5 minutes. That's an achievement as compared to doing things over months. And we've opened this opportunity up to the industry. The commercial levers for any service provider is back office, improvement, automation, efficiency, reduction of fraud, and bank charges, reducing those capabilities. And so we've gone from a 2-carrier POC to a multi-carrier POC, and I'm getting on the plane this afternoon to go to London because this week we'll be working on potential governance concepts for the industry in order to deliver blockchain solutions as a back-end framework that could introduce multiple technology vendors to the process, have an open environment for service providers, and assure that interoperability and automation can take place together, but not just among carriers. Because the moment the service provider community steps forward and becomes innovative together as a community, I think that we'll be in a good position to make progress. So governance model is next, and that's where we're going, as well as the technology strategy. This is again the timeline of where we are, and we expect that by the end of 2019, the latest, first quarter of 2020, we will be opening this environment up openly for all carriers. We expect that blockchain can provide then for a programmable billing layer which will allow 5G-enabled services. You heard a lot about that up until now. You heard about IoT, but people aren't talking about the back end and how to interface amongst the different layers. You're going to do connected cars, but have we really settled on what is the IoT settlement process that takes place from Nissan to AT&T to Singtel to Telecom Egypt to PCCW Global to Etisalat to Do? Has that process really been thought through? And as regulators, given their approach to it, content distribution will be quite critical. Monitoring and tracking, smart surveillance, remote operations, all of these activities will become addressable transactions that are already in place in countries like Singapore, Korea, China, and soon in Hong Kong, and also here in the Middle East. But we need to make sure that there's an interoperable wholesale interface to different layers in the value chain. The lessons that we learned when we did the POC was that it provides scale, it provides automation, and it is a platform for all ICT services. It's not just for carriers. Consider for a moment the fact that if you're on FaceTime using an Apple device and you want to have a video from that FaceTime environment to a WhatsApp-based Android position, the only thing you can do is go out of FaceTime, back into WhatsApp. What happens if, for instance, as part of the activities that are going on in the difference of view between North America and China at this moment, there might be a decision, for instance, to drop away from certain devices or certain applications in China? What if in China they say, no, only WeChat? How is there going to be interoperable communications in these environments? How will that work forward? Because the clouds haven't been pressed by regulators, whether domestic governments or international environments, for interoperability. But the clouds actually will be eager for it, because ultimately that will be the lever for their growth. And so ultimately, when we get to what are the objectives in an ICT environment, for the last 150 years, it's been ubiquity, making sure that one person can communicate with the other across the same terms. So we need to define new ICT services and dimensions. And most importantly, in my view, the industry as network-based service providers needs to open its door, and hopefully independent cloud ecosystems will go the same way. Just a couple weeks ago here in the UAE, the ITU held its conference here for 2018. And you can see on the left-hand side the decision for a working group for OTT. The language is vague, and I encourage those who are interfacing here in the room with ITU to think about some of the messages that I provided. It's a message not designed to force OTTs into place, quite the contrary. They're not the challenge, they're actually the fuel for growth. But the question is, how do we assure ubiquity for users, whether consumer or enterprise, through a wholesale interoperability framework that makes sense for everyone to deliver common services, so that these types of productized connectivities that come from various cloud environments, various applications that are riding over physical networks can be delivered. So that's my hope. The commercial Samech asked me to deliver. We're doing a lot of undersea cables, because when you think about what I was talking about, most of the business here is about softwareization and applications. I just want to remind you, it sits on infrastructure. In order to build that infrastructure, you have to invest huge amounts of capital in order to make sure that the business case moves forward. We do that regularly from the Mediterranean all the way through to Asia. Admittedly, we don't focus that much on the Americas, although we have large networks there. These are some of the systems that we've been operating and working on in the last year. And one that's exciting to us is this one, PEACE, which stands for Pakistan East Africa Cable to Europe. Hopefully it also will generate peace. It's a facilitator, in our view, to help drive some of the concepts of One Belt, One Road economics that are coming from mainland China and from Asia Pacific in general. And we hope that you'll be willing to interact with us on the street here in the Middle East, in Asia, and everywhere in the world in an interoperable, ubiquitous manner. And I hope you enjoyed what I had to say about the back end. Thank you very much.